So my name's Greg DeLine, DeLine.
So you're the owner here, right, Greg?
I am.
What would you, I think a lot of folks, at least that reach out to us, concern-wise in the mobile home manufactured home industry is how safe are they when it comes to severe weather? What would you tell potential residents, something like that?
So I would say that again, the real estate market is absolutely crazy. Everybody knows that. Not only full price, but over full price on just about every home sold, and there's very little inventory out there. So I sell these things as an alternative. But as far as the safety factor, if you look at this home, okay, number one, they're built much, much better than they ever used to be. And so if you take this home, they're brought in from a manufacturing plant. And let's say 450 miles. 50 miles an hour, 9 hours. So they're traveling 9 hours with sustained winds of 70, 72, 73 miles an hour, okay? I beg the question, would your stick built do that, Maybe, but I think certainly that speaks for a lot. And it's really important for how these things are set, okay? So they need to be on some type of a permanent foundation, certainly concrete involved, whether it be just piers or whether it be a slab or a crawl space or a basement. And then they need to be anchored properly. And so like we are licensed by the state to install a home. The manufacturer gives installation instructions for maximum safety. And so we're licensed and we have to set the homes on the foundation according to those specifications.
Okay. In terms of safety regulations, what are things like these rated for? Because you mentioned they can travel, 75 mile per hour winds.
Right.
Persistent, right? What's the high-end threshold of that?
Okay. So, and that's a very good question. So the federal government basically gives the parameters and the specifications. And so the country's split into 3 zones. Zone 1 in the south, Zone 2 in the Midwest, Zone 3 really north of Missouri and Iowa or whatever. And so to be sold in this area, it has to be built for this area. And so the government also has parameters and categories for wind, and it's called the wind zone. And so these things, again, have to be built to sustain the winds that are typical in a particular area. Okay. And so I own a trucking company, and we deliver a lot in the south. Well, that's, the hurricanes or whatever. And so, anyway.
So here, is there like a particular number or does it just kind of depend on how things are anchored to what foundation as to how high of a wind you can sustain when it, say, it comes to severe weather necessarily? Because tropical stuff is a little more persistent, lower end wind, but a little longer lived. Right. Here in Missouri, I feel like we're going to be seeing more higher end winds, but for shorter durations.
And I kind of agree with that to a point, but kind of okay. So like hurricane force, I believe, is over 90. I think your normal tornado, and I'm not that familiar with it, but a little bit, but probably 100. So I think that's a similar situation. Again, I think that the structure is traveling on the highway, taking sustained winds of 70, 72, 73. And so I think the structure, I think certainly they're not even close to falling apart at that. So, I mean, they would take a tornado wind, the structure. But what happens is, again, if the air is able to get underneath and then lift it, basically, it's going to take it. And then I don't think the wind did the damage. Where the wind threw it, did the damage.
So it's more about necessarily the anchoring to that foundation or whatever you have there, right?
I think that's exactly right. And again, that goes back to each home has a manufacturer's manual, okay? And it says how it's to be set up, and it says how it's to be anchored. And there's vector systems that are used. Everything today with the technology or whatever is engineered to a certain point. And so the anchoring systems, which have to be, again, approved by the state because of our licensing, that we've anchored something according to the manufacturer's specifications. And those are, like I said, typically signed off by an engineer. And so the homes, again, would be able to sustain whatever's typical in Missouri.
Is there any sort of regulation process where you have to check up on that every year? Is there something that goes into that whether it's, I don't know if the government would necessarily do that or if it's some other entity, is there a checkup process on that?
There's really not, in place, but it's available for anybody. Again, the Missouri Public Service Commission regulates the manufacturing industry in Missouri and the dealers. And so certainly they are available to the public. That's a government entity, a state agency. And so if someone had concern, I would call them a Missouri Public Service Commission. And you could do that annually or whatever you wanted to. Certainly, if a customer that we had and they were concerned about that, we would be glad to send one of our licensed people that, again, are licensed by the Public Service Commission to install the home according to manufacturer specs. We would be glad to do that too. So that would be just on a case by case. But as far as any kind of standard regulation, no, there's not any.
Okay.
So again, I think that the thing that you want to do is make sure you get something from a reputable dealer, somebody that's licensed to install it according to the manufacturer's specifications, that's regulated by the Missouri Public Service Commission. Once you would do all of that, these things are as safe as a stick built. Again, because what I was talking about with the traveling on the highway, there's really not a concern there as long as it's set up and installed properly.
Okay.
So this is basically a typical setup, you'll see that it's got what's called skirting, and that's a firm skirting that will stop any kind of animal penetration, varmints or whatever. It's got vents in the side because it's really important to make sure that the home doesn't trap moisture underneath there. And it'll literally, if it's not vented properly, it'll literally suck that into the floor and into the house. And that's a lot of times what gives mobile homes historically a bad name is condensation like that. So it's important to have a vapor barrier, which there is underneath that. It's important to have the venting. It's important to have the skirting. And back in behind there, it's anchored. And so it may be a vector system, like I said, that's engineered for this particular setup or whatever, and that's signed off by an engineer in the homeowner's manual. Okay,
and is that something that you guys take care of when you deliver it? Is that like knock it out now, or is that something that the homeowner itself has to check up on or has to make sure it gets done by the time
and again, so that's a very good question. The state, again, who licenses us, basically regulates us. I shouldn't say, they do license us too. They license us and regulate us. So they make sure that we set the home according to the manufacturer specifications. And they check probably just about everyone that we sell. So normally, we will include delivery and setup with the price. Once in a great while, we'll sell the home just delivered. And then it's up to the customer to do that. But we have to do certain sign-offs by the customer that says, hey, we're taking full responsibility for this, again, to satisfy the Public Service Commission.
Is there a certain time frame they have to do that by? Like you say you buy the home on X date, do you have, say, 30 days or something like that to get that done by?
There's not anything set in stone that it's got to be that. It's really simultaneous, okay? So you're going to deliver and then you're going to set, weather permitting. And so I think it's more of a rule of thumb, a general, the Public Service Commission, they're very good and they're easy to get along with. But within a reasonable time, you think about that reasonable person standard. So within a reasonable time, the home needs to be set up properly and anchored and to make sure that it's safe.
Okay.